All right, we're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering the Week 12 action. So to get straight into it, starting off with Texans versus Bills on Thursday Night Football, and it went about how you would expect in terms of the rushing attack early. Like James Cook is just too damn good, and the fact that there was even a question about his ability to perform while still awaiting his contract extension in the offseason. We are so far away from that. He has put it all out there on the tape this season. And this game would start out no different for the man. Just having a few situations where he was stuffed for sure, but still finding ways to get out in space and make the defense pay with his blend of vision and burst. And this 45-yard touchdown run just put it into perspective. I mean, all it took for the man was a little bit of patience and a single jump cut. And just like that, the seas parted open for the man to just run right through for a score. Aside from that, though, in a few of his other runs over the first few possessions, the Texans' defense is deservedly getting a lot of credit. And it started with their ability to limit James Cook III's damage on the ground. I mean, he was rendered pretty much ineffective for the rest of the game. Like, especially in the second half. And after such a hot start, by that point in time, he essentially became a non-factor. Like, the Bills have been that reliant in terms of rushing the football all season long. And that is probably never going to change. Sure, James Cook was still going to get his yards in some sense. But it didn't happen enough to where the Bills, down the stretch in pivotal moments, could rely on that. They had to rely more so on throwing the football. Say what you want about their perimeter offense and the supposed lack of receivers that they have. Sans for Khalil Shakir. Regardless of that, it all came together for the Texans. And you just have to commend them a ton here. Like, Davis Mills has certainly steadied the ship for him, but they were still placed in some very favorable positions because of what that Texans defense was doing. I mean, you look at this thing, we get to a point where the Texans have not only gotten a field goal to start out the game, but they would respond to that aforementioned Bills field goal with a touchdown drive of their own. I don't know why Nico Collins got his number dialed up so fucking late in the game. That's a little interesting, right? But hey, nevertheless, they kept on feeding the Iowa State man in Jaden Higgins. And before you knew it, they were in go-to-go territory where Christian Kirk, of all people, was just getting loose in the back of the end zone. Nobody accounted for the man. But hey, despite him being pretty much all over the place over the course of the past few years, hey, he got himself a touchdown catch. What can you say? They literally show a graphic after this drive stating that the Texans led at the time the NFL in total defense in terms of yards and points allowed per game. And what do you know? Something that would become very important for them would be their dynamic of coverage and pass rush. They had done an exceptional job in both cases. And it was no different right here, where you actually had Azeez Al-Shire get backed up in his own specific zone as Josh Allen was releasing this football, and he deflects it right into the hands of Kalen Bullock awaiting it, and he would get his first interception of the day. Keep that in mind. You get that going down, and while the Texans themselves did struggle at certain points of time to take advantage of these. Because I can tell you right now, between the interceptions here and the fact that they had other important turnovers that granted the Houston squad elite field position, when they got in those situations, actually didn't do a really great job of converting, as one would like to believe. Sure, they had to settle for a few points, and I mean, this field goal would prove that. But when you can hold any team who's inside your own 30 to 40 yard line to not even reach the red zone at points, and to hold up in those situations, to just surrender 3 at a time, like, you're still in the game, miraculously enough. And that was the case for the Bills here. It would also help that Ray Davis is just a fucking elite special teamer. I mean, quite literally, he gets this fucking kick return after the Texans score, alright? He is trying his absolute hardest to protect the football, and all of a sudden, he just bounces off, hits a spin move on a Texans defender, and he just turns right up the field, has Townsend trying to track him down, and he fucking gets a deep juke cut on him, because he really stands no chance of tackling him at that point. And just like that, he was gone, allowing the Bills to snatch back a little bit of momentum. But look at the 2-minute offense between Nico Collins getting this catch and also having Christian Kirk and Jaden Higgins cap off the drive with an 8-yard touchdown catch. Hey, watching all of that live, I'm like, okay. You know, the Texans aren't playing around. They are giving them a fight right now. And when you're going up against a team like that, that's all you can really ask for at some point. But they ensured that they more than deserve to win this ball game. Especially when you look at the fact that the first few drives of this half really went something like punt, 3 and out, and then another turnover here as Khalil Shakir, man, he did do a nice job of picking up this third down across the middle. And as he was trying to run out of bounds, maybe get a few extra yardage added on to the play, bruh, Kalen Bullock had an all-around game. Like, he got his arm right in there to punch the ball out. And Jaden Reed, not to be confused with Jaden Reed. But this is a rookie. I believe that this Jaden Reed is from K-State, if I'm not mistaken. Or Jalen Reed, rather. Hold on. Let's just do this real quick. Oh, no, he's from Penn State. Oh, dear. Oh boy. Damn. Hey, no, either way, I believe that would be his first fumble recovery on the year. And that would give the Texans possession at the 22-yard line. But they would be stuffed regardless. They tried to make it the Woody Marks show. The shit did not matter, and Kymie Fairbairn would bang it in regardless. I don't know, it just kept going on like this. And both teams would stalemate for a little bit, with the Bills also going on a turnover on downs. Like, they trusted James Cook that much, and sure, the volume was kind of getting them a little bit in between having to worry about Josh Allen as well. But when it came down to it, a crucial 4th down here that the Bills, looking at this, would probably want back. He just got completely stuffed at the line and lost yardage. Sheldon Rankins, you're dealing with him, an elite run stopper throughout his entire career. I mean, what do you expect, right? I had to consistently look back and forth at a few plays at a time. I wasn't intently watching every single second of this one while tending to other business. But I was able to keep up with a lot of the important parts. I did not see that Matt Prater got this field goal, which you have to credit the Texans for stopping them in the first place. But between Khalil Shakir getting this 44-yard catch after breaking multiple tackles on what should have been him being stopped for a 4th down. Kind of a deviation from how they've typically been playing. And we haven't even mentioned at all, I'd be remiss to say, man, that Texans defensive line got on his ass all game, dude. They got on his ass. It is not all about the quarterback, but, man, they made him look silly. Between Tim Settle Jr. getting this one to push them back in the first place, and also, even on this final, potentially ill-fated drive for the Bills here, you still had him endure even more sacks from both Will Anderson Jr., who had legitimately been owning that offensive line, and Danielle Hunter. Going back to Anderson Jr. real quick, like, there was a sack earlier in this game where Josh Allen is trying his hardest to make something happen, and so he's scrambling around the whole time, trying to make a number of different moves in the backfield. And Anderson Jr. missed him the first time, which forces him to go out and do all this. Then he runs right back inside, and Will Anderson Jr. gets himself back into the play and sacks him anyways. That is exactly how this night went. If no other one of these sacks tells the story like this, that one does. Because it's like, dude, at that point, I'm just going to throw the ball away. I'm not even worried about forcing anything. I got to get it. Why would you want to lose yards in that situation? I don't necessarily know. But that's besides the point. The Bills went the copycat and shit, which I did not see. But they pulled off this lateral to get them right at Houston's 26-yard line. And from there, They pulled out all the stops. They tried to get Gabe Davis involved. They tried to get Ty Johnson a rep. And they tried to get Khalil Shakir on a short route, which has typically been money for them, given his ability after the catch. But Will Anderson Jr. was all over it. It came down to a 4th and 1 initially, which I did see, before Deion Dawkins, out of every single lineman, shit, in the game, you're not expecting him to have such a crucial penalty at this moment in the game. That is exactly what ended up happening, and that would force a deeper 4th down here, a little less manageable. He was, again, looking for something that wasn't there, and what do you know? Kalen Bullock, before Josh Allen could even think about making this read, worked the pass almost immediately. Even with what would be deemed OPI, it didn't matter. Kalen Bullock was in perfect position to get himself his 2nd sack and force his 3rd takeaway of the game, essentially, giving the Texans the 23-19 edge over Buffalo. Shit's wild. Who would have thought coming into the game that it'd be like this, especially without C.J. Stroud, even if it is not only a quarterback-centric thing. It's like crazy, right? But hey, they did it. They truly did. And that is in no small part due to their defense. Between Jalen Reed, I should say, getting 12 tackles in this game, between Azeez Al-Shire, Henry To'o, and E.J. Speed all logging at least 7 tackles, and with Will Anderson Jr. having the dominant game that he did, fucking 6 tackles and 2.5 sacks, along with 2 TFLs and a pass deflection. Not to mention Bullock's aforementioned 5 tackles, 2 interceptions, and pass deflections. The defense as a whole had 8 sacks combined, with Danielle Hunter also getting 2, with Tim Settle Jr. getting 1, with Derek Barnett getting 1. Everybody was getting fed. And Anderson Jr.'s would contribute to him logging his 6th straight game for a sack, which is tied for the most in Texans history, along with Mario Williams. It's been a long time since then. The fact that J.J. Watt hasn't even done that is a little wild, right? But I guess that is just how offenses started to adjust to players over time. Like, we're not going to seriously call J.J. Watt a lesser player than Mario Williams because of that. But simply put, as offenses started to modernize, man, they tried a lot more elaborate and creative ways to counter these dominant defensive linemen. And we know what J.J. Watt was consistently dealing with. But as for the numbers here, Davis Mills would have 153 passing yards and 2 touchdowns on 53.3% completion. Nothing really flashy, but he protected the ball. And in a game like this that comes to be this close, that is your best chance at victory. They forced Josh Allen to make countless mistakes. They forced Khalil Shakir into coughing up the football. Like, they did every single thing they needed to do to help one another out, with the exception of special teams. But hey, that's fine. Woody Marks had 16 carries for 74 yards, and Nico Collins had 3 receptions for 55 yards. Christian Kirk had 5 receptions for 54 yards and a score, and Jaden Higgins had 4 receptions for 38 yards and a touchdown as well. As for the Bills, Josh Allen had 253 passing yards on 70.6% completion and 2 picks. Man, wild shit. And to think that he'd been in the running for MVP consideration. Like, the past few weeks have not been so kind to him. I mean, sure, I'd say that he probably resuscitated his ability to go out and win one with the 6 touchdown game against the Bucs. But at the same point, when you factor in just a couple bad losses in this stretch, and he's thrown a pick in all of these past few games as well, it's like, hey, part of the mindset was that, even though Lamar Jackson last season protected the ball at a far greater rate, Josh Allen had finally unlocked the code to being a complimentary football player, not necessarily needing to play hero ball all the time, making the smart decisions and being surgical as a field general, while balancing that out with his strong ability to run, especially in the red zone. It felt as though he'd finally learned that, and he's just reverting back to some old tactics and habits. I don't know really what to say about it. It's kind of weird. James Cook III had 17 rushes for 116 yards in the score. Khalil Shakir had 8 receptions for 110 yards as well, and Ty Johnson out of the backfield had 3 receptions for 45 yards, because of course he did. Of course he did. That's not surprising. But all right. Moving into the Sunday action, and starting off with the Seahawks and the Titans getting after it. We're going to talk a lot about what a few running backs had done across the league. Disclaimer, at least when it comes to the Sunday action. That's for damn sure. I mean, man, there were some masterclasses, truly. But in a game that appeared to be a lot closer than it actually was, the Seahawks would get themselves a 30-24 win against the Titans. No need to necessarily flex on this, but I will say that against a strong Seahawks defense, Cam Ward, by sheer volume and the fact that they wanted to be as aggressive as possible against the Seahawks team. I mean, they literally came out with a 9-minute drive to open up the game, still settling for a field goal at this point. I mean, he had arguably his best game of the season to this point. Did a fair job of protecting the football, had 2 total touchdowns, and had 293 total yards on 66.7% completion. Definitely not half bad, so you have to give respect there. But still, when you are the Titans and you are in his position and you cannot run the football, that's been the theme of their season, there's a natural struggle that comes with that. And they still just managed 64 yards on the ground. And just 2.9 yards per carry. You take that rushing contribution out from Cam Ward, and all three of their running backs combined for fucking 16 carries and 27 yards. What are you supposed to do with that? You expect him to succeed in that kind of offense? I'm just not all too sure about that. Chimere Dike for the Titans also had a solid all-around game. Between him not only getting a punt return touchdown as a person already looking like one of the better return men in the NFL, but also having himself a receiving touchdown in what could be considered to be garbage time towards the tail end of the game, while adding 44 receiving yards on 5 catches on the day. Gunnar Helm, the rookie from Texas, also had 6 receptions for 51 yards for the Titans. But man, even without having to do too much, the Seahawks still rolled in this game. They were up by as much as 20 consistently. And we know what the story is. Even though the important thing was to keep a clean game going. And Sam Darnold and the entire offense overall did not really give up the football. Just good old smash mouth running, with Kenneth Walker III having 71 rushing yards on the day on 11 carries. And the team as a whole getting 114 yards and a touchdown score from none other than Zach Charbonnet. Jackson Smith-Njigba is way too good. If people don't want to admit this to themselves already, man, oh my goodness. Oh man, I had somebody, even in passing, I still just can't believe how crazy this sounds. I had somebody come up behind me, rather. They knew they couldn't even say this to my face because I couldn't even take that shit seriously in the moment. I had somebody come up here and tell me that Jackson Smith-Njigba was not a top 20 receiver in the NFL, and all he has gone on to do consistently this season is continue to prove why he is far greater than a top 20 receiver in the NFL. Week in and week out. Like, man, between him legitimately getting downfield from the slot position, which he typically been doing to start out his career, and getting a fucking 63-yard touchdown catch, walking smoothly into the end zone just because, and then also working the short routes from Tom to Tom, getting his work in on the offensive side that way, and torching defenses in that manner, only to follow it up later on by having a different 56-yard catch where he almost gets away from the rookie out of Penn State in Kevin Winston Jr., just trying to hang on for dear life, and he's eventually forced out of bounds. Crazy stuff, man. 8 receptions for 167 yards for the man and 2 touchdowns. He has now already done a lot between setting his career high in total touchdown catches in a season, between him being the 5th player to have at least 1,300 receiving yards in the first 11 games, along with Elroy Hurst, Charlie Hennigan, Tyreek Hill, and Julio Jones from all of their respective seasons. We remember that both Jones and Hill definitely had over 1,800-yard seasons. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, is also the 3rd player to have at least 75 in 11 consecutive games, along with Marvin Harrison Sr. and Cooper Kupp. Both of those seasons, if I'm not mistaken, were Triple Crown years. I mean, we remember Cooper Kupp's 2021. And we know that he was on pace to do something that Marvin Harrison Sr. had done before him. While also, at that point, in the NFL, Tom Juan holding the record for catches in a season before Michael Thomas broke it. And I think Michael Thomas will be mentioned later. To just know that he was doing some of this stuff and is just now out of the league. It is wild, dude. It's so crazy, man. Like, yo, you can't make this up, bro. Like, it's so unfortunate. Also, with his current stat line right now, he still has 6 more games to go. He is actively on pace for the receiving yards record in a year. I don't know if he's on track for the Triple Crown. I can take a look at that real quick when I go to overall stats for wide receivers. But as of right now, he is now the all-time record holder in Seattle Seahawks history when it comes to receiving yards in a year at over 1,300, with a nearly 300-yard advantage on the rest of the league. And okay, so he is tied for second behind a fellow. Like, this is just okay, because we'll get into these players, not to prolong it, but that is the top 4. That's the top 4. And Jackson Smith and Jigba is technically a catch behind. That's insane, dude. That's crazy. Like, you can't make the NFC West players in some capacity. That's bold, man. But hey, aside from George Pickens being on this list as well as the next closest guy in terms of receiving yards. So yeah, that's kind of the story of the season. Another tremendous game for him and a solid win for the Seahawks. You didn't need to do the craziest thing in the world and go all crazy on Tennessee. It's Tennessee, we understand that. But hey, you have to continue stacking up wins, and you know, the Seahawks are definitely doing a great job of making that happen this season. Alright, so moving on to the next game I'll be covering, and oh my goodness. Okay, where do I even start with this Vikings-Packers game? It seems so obvious, but I want to keep some form of positivity going. I said we were going to address a lot of the running back play at this time, and dude, how about fucking Emmanuel Wilson in this game? How about him, dude? Like, they had no game plan for the man. The Vikings thought they had him for a brief second after Josh Jacobs would be ruled out with an injury heading into this. Now, Wilson had been a solid change of pace guy for sure, but now you're asking him to assume starting caliber running back duties. And that's not always the easiest transition for people. He didn't lose a step. He didn't lose a fucking step. A Vikings defense that is typically stout in the run game had no answer for him whatsoever. By sheer force, they just continued to run the ball. Who gives a damn if he was efficient with every single one of his carries? He was just muscling up for some big yards at major points, including this goal-to-go territory on the very first drive for them, giving the Packers a slight advantage in the game. And as things progress, the Vikings would certainly get theirs as a defense. They're too good to consistently get beaten. I mean, even credit Dallas Turner here for just shedding right through a block attempt, virtually unfazed, and getting to Jordan Love easily. Like, even though they had their own struggles, it's not like the Vikings were totally out of this game. But as they continued to punch the ball down the field and punch them in their fucking mouths by running the ball so relentlessly, it started to wear that Vikings defense down. You could tell. Even with them taking a 4-point lead on this field goal possession. Dude, you are talking about 5 straight runs to start up this drive with another 4 dispersed throughout the rest of it. regardless of whether or not they were stuffed for no gain. Maybe there were a few negative plays generated here. It doesn't matter if you are able to stick to your game plan like that, and you are not feeling any pressure whatsoever to switch up what it is that you're doing. Why play this game in a pretty way? Especially when we're talking about NFC North caliber football in the later months. The Packers have a shit ton of divisional games coming up. So this is just the start of it. And if they can run their game plan like this, they'll be fine. Especially when they know that their defense has got them. Especially when they know that. It continued throughout the rest of the game. And I mean, granted, Emmanuel Wilson would get his next one from very short territory because that's just how it was. In fact, the entire fourth quarter really didn't need to see the Packers be as aggressive. All they had to do at that point was just keep the ball out of harm's way. And in those situations, you're going to trust your running back and you're going to trust Jordan Love to make solid decisions, which he did do towards the tail end of the game. Like, he did not have to be the greatest passer in the world. He didn't have to activate the Favre-Rodgers dynamic today. He didn't. All he had to do was hand that ball off, and more often than not, Emmanuel Wilson's intensity in the game would win through en route to what would be a career-high day for him in terms of 28 rushes, 107 yards, a career-high, and 2 touchdowns. With all that being said, for the Packers, their defense punked J.J. McCarthy. It is as simple as that. And not only punked J.J. McCarthy, but a lot of this kind of goes on the offensive line too. Now, yes, there are some situations where J.J. McCarthy is still not developed enough as a player to understand that in some of these cases, you cannot hold on to the ball like he was. He was just doing it for prolonged amounts of time, and when you're giving guys like Gary and Parsons off the edge that much space to get in there and completely ring your bells, you're going to have a problem. Like, it just wouldn't stop. But there were some of these too that you just can't excuse on the part of the offensive line. It felt like at every one of these drops, they faced something, the Vikings, that just completely took them back. And it wasn't even just the edge rushers. You had some of the interior guys get in there and have a field day on everybody. Between Isaiah McDuffie getting him, and then Bari also had a few solid TFLs in this game as well. J.J. McCarthy actually lost a fucking fumble. Well, not lost a fumble, but managed to be in a spot where he nearly lost one earlier as a result of all that pressure. And then there were some later ones involving Micah Parsons, dude, where he's going up against Christian Darrisaw. And granted, like, Darrisaw is recently returning from injury. So, you know, if that happens one time, I can excuse that a little bit, right? He's got to get back into the flow of the game. But now you're dealing with a person in Micah Parsons who would, in this game, become the first Packer with a 10-sack season since 2020. And I believe that was Preston Smith at the time. Unless I am tripping. Can just check to confirm that real quick. Because I know that Preston Smith was a Packer around this time. So it could have been him. Oh. Well, okay. He got his in 2019 with 12. Alright, so I can just go here. And, well, no, I'm not looking at game logs. But yeah, no, they just kept that going. Yet, Darrisaw, I don't know what it was about him. Like, yo, it got to a point where he was just getting bullied, okay? And he's like, that's not supposed to happen. Especially with a person in Darisaw who is supposed to be holding it down on that side of the line. Like, if you're not going to have him, of any single offensive player, maybe outside of Will Fries, protect them, then what are you going to do? And even with something that I saw in post, you know how sad it is for them to be in a position where McCarthy is getting hounded all day by pretty much everybody, and they still felt the need to go out of their way to have 3 different people try to triple team Micah Parsons in one fell swoop on a given rep. And it still didn't work all that well, because not only would Micah Parsons break through for a sack on this particular drive to end off the third quarter for the Vikings, but Devontae Wyatt would also get back there and get himself on the board. Like, just take your pick. I mean, even Devontae Wyatt here would damn near force a safety on J.J. McCarthy through his sheer strength in the interior. And again, you're paying Will Franz all that money to hold down that specific area of the line, virtually a non-factor. It was very slow for the Vikings offense. I'll put it like that. They did manage to get some points. In fact, Will Reichert would make a 59-yard field goal that would actually tie for the second longest in Lambeau earlier in the game. If not for Will Reichert, I don't know where they would have ended up in this game. I really don't. But it won't only get worse from there. I mean, you still have a chance to make something out of this game despite being down by 17. But at this point, all of your chances had eluded you. And now, you had to resort to a little bit of desperation. Everything was just forced from here on out. Isaiah McDuffie would be the recipient of a J.J. McCarthy pick. And then this one, oh my goodness. Man, he got caught trying to throw a fucking money ball deep, alright? And I'm not gonna lie, from a certain angle, it looks as though it's there for the taking for McCarthy. The only thing is, he overthrows this by just enough to where Evan Williams of the Packers himself would get another pick from him. And in typical Packers fashion, they didn't need a lot from their offense in this game, but managed to win 23-6 anyways, because of how great their defense was playing. Like, you just take all this into consideration, the fact that the Packers as a whole combined for 5 sacks. Isaiah McDuffie had a great all-around game on his front. Everybody was just going to work on that end. Like, they could not move the football enough. And they certainly couldn't establish anything at all. McCarthy would thrive in a balanced system. We knew that was the case even when he was at Michigan, and even when he would have these fluky deep ball throws. The run has got to open the pass for the man, or he's not going to contribute. It's not going to happen. To have him try to take control of the game under his own volition, what's that? Man, it's just tough. Like, as a team, the Vikings, if you can believe this, accounted for just 145 yards. In what universe? Especially if you're losing the turnover battle as well. But even then, that came later. You had a number of opportunities to pounce on Green Bay, and you just didn't. 87 passing yards and 2 picks. Justin Jefferson can't take this shit anymore. We want to talk about all these JJs, man. He cannot deal with this shit anymore, man. It's wild. And to think that the Vikings themselves didn't really do a terrible job on their front at all. They had a standard defensive game, and it just looks so bad because it wasn't countered with much of anything from that offense. But I will give credit to both Blake Cashman and Josh Metellus, who had 16 and 12 tackles in this game, respectively, doing their best to get down and dirty for a few solid plays. But when your offense is not benefiting at all, or maybe not even attempting to really do so at this point, there's only so much a defense can do. And the Packers themselves had been in that situation, ironically enough. It definitely helps that they could be on the winning side of such a predicament. But how consistent is that going to be? I guess we'll find out. They will continue to be tested by other competition, especially when we look at the Lions and the Bears down the stretch. So, hey, there you go. All right, moving on to the Ravens and the Jets. And my main takeaway from New York, well, they do suck. That's the obvious statement that we're probably going to go with here. They are terrible, but they're also just like, man, like, they just get themselves in such weird situations. Because for you to want to rely on Tyrod Taylor, come out and publicly say that after the supposed ineptitude that Justin Fields has been up to this season, you still manage the game in the relative manner that you were already throughout the entire season. And in just a weird way imaginable. I mean, all they kept doing is running the football. Yes, Tyrod Taylor added the element of a passing, but they still operated a good number of their drives, just spamming the run, even doing it on third down situations. And weirdly enough, when they got in those positions, they couldn't make up their mind about what they wanted to do or not on the subsequent down. Like, the fact that they were on this 42-yard line of the Ravens earlier in the game on one of these possessions. And rather than maybe trust Nick Folk at this point, that's almost a 60-yard field goal. I kind of see why you don't, but rather than do anything at all, you take it away a game and you want to punt for fucking field position? What is the game plan exactly? I'm not entirely sure. Then you get into other possessions where they just make a multitude of questionable decisions. And ultimately that, even with all of the different turnovers in mind, would be their undoing. I mean, even this one, like, you do the right thing, I guess, and going for it on fourth down, and you'd had success with John Mechie earlier in the game. I mean, their touchdown came off of the exact same play that they ran for him against the Pats. It worked to perfection. Marlon Humphrey was nowhere to be found. Fair enough. But the pass attempt here was so incredibly weak that it would still be a turnover on downs. It's like, what exactly is the goal? I don't know. Like, it's not even like the Jets were out of it. Defensively, they did give themselves a chance. And this was a one-score game to open up the fourth quarter. I think the ultimate backbreaker was the fact that Breece Hall, typically with him being the best skill position player out there, you're going to want to feed him. I mean, he already had a massive fucking gain after spinning off of a would-be tackle from Alohi Gilman and going damn near a yard for a 40-yard gain off a screen down the field. He tried to do the same thing, and he wanted to fight for extra yardage, typical. He has multiple Ravens surrounding him, and let's just say that Marlon Humphrey, we know he's learned a lot from Charles Tillman at this point, but he, as Breece Hall is trying to still churn forward. Keep those legs moving. He has the ball exposed, and Marlon Humphreys just fucking clawing away at the football, trying to rip it out of his hands like he's a fucking like he's a fucking armadillo burrowing some fucking underground habitat. Simply put, and he gets a hold of it, forces the fumble, and Aloy Gilman gets it back. That kind of killed the Jets' momentum at that point, and the Ravens still didn't have to do that much on offense. But along with the Jets also getting a turnover on downs in their own territory, granted, you have to score a touchdown at that point. You're desperate to. But the Ravens would add a field goal to this and would also have T.J. Tampa Jr. after Mike Green actually got a fucking sack on Teron Taylor get his first NFL interception. And the Ravens, by and large, had the advantage at that point. Now, granted, they themselves, on the part of the Jets defense, kind of playing them fairly well. They weren't all perfect themselves. It took a while for them to get going. And granted, that's kind of been a theme of some of these games as they've gotten the return of some of their core guys. Fair enough. But ultimately, when they needed to pick it up, they picked it up. Like, the efficiency wasn't all there, but they did the best with what they could. Could have been a lot worse. They were actually down 7-3 at halftime, despite all of this inconsistency from the Jets. But, hey, they charged back in the third quarter, doing what they do best, despite Justice Hill trying his absolute hardest to fuck it up. Okay? Spam Derrick Henry, give DeAndre Hopkins a look, and bow. All of a sudden, Derrick Henry's in go-to-go territory. So you know what time it is as soon as that happens. And he would burst right in for a touchdown to make himself give himself even more of a distance at fifth all-time in terms of rushing touchdowns in his NFL career. And as he would continue to make progress throughout the game, getting another touchdown, this time on 4th and goal. And weirdly enough, the first three had a number of different guys bottle him up between my namesake and also Derrick Henry getting tackled by Brownlee Jr., Jarvis Brownlee Jr., of all people, on the first couple downs. Yet, when it came time for them to go for it on 4th down, you figured they were going to go with a run up the middle, and there was no one to be found in that gap to stop Derrick Henry. You already fucked up the second that happened. You have to throw bodies at that man. Do you not understand that at this point? I'm not entirely sure if they do. Nonetheless, the Ravens would create a lot of their distance there. It would ultimately finish out the game a lot stronger, giving themselves a 23-10 win. Should have been a lot easier than this, but hey, you'll take it. Lamar Jackson would have 153 passing yards on 56.5% completion, and also 11 rushing yards. He's definitely seen better days, but, you actually want to, have that happen every now and then if you are a Ravens fan. If they can prove to you that they can get the job done without Lamar Jackson having to be MVP caliber, even though we know he can be week in and week out, that's tremendous. The defense is also starting to find their footing, similarly to how they did in the second half of the last season. Derrick Henry had 21 rushes for 64 yards and 2 scores, giving him as well the 12th all-time highest mark in rushing yards in NFL history, and he passed a number of different running backs, including Marshall Faulk, including Edgerrin James, and including Marcus Allen. Zay Flowers had 5 receptions for 58 yards, and Devontae Walker had 1 reception for 30 yards. They tried to do DeAndre Hopkins so dirty, though. He only needed one more catch to reach the 1,000 catch milestone in this game. And for whatever reason, they just started to abandon it. And I'm sure he'll get it probably in the next game, but man, you could have handled that shit. Like, I don't know. As for the Jets, Tyrod Taylor had 222 yards and a touchdown and an INT on 60.7% completion. At least he was willing to throw the football, but it still didn't result in that much success. And granted, you could attribute that to the fact that Breece Hall, on yet another week, had to be both the leading rusher and receiver with a total of 20 touches for 119 yards and no touchdowns. John Mayfield III had 6 receptions for 65 yards and a score, and Adonai Mitchell had 2 receptions for 42 yards. Alright, moving on to a little bit of bonus coverage with the Lions and the Giants. Yes, Jared Goff, by his standards, might have had a little bit of an underwhelming game, but at the same time, are we just going to sit here and act like JAHMYR GIBBS doesn't exist? Let's give the man credit where credit is due. The performance that he had in this game was yet another legendary one from him in his short career and inches him ever closer to becoming as accomplished of a player from scrimmage when it comes to total touchdowns before he's even reached the age of 24. Referencing the stat that was mentioned in the Commanders game, the tear is just undeniable from this man. He is an unreal fucking player. You know, it wasn't there for the Lions the whole time. The fact that they were actually down in this game while I was tracking it was a little shocking. But, man, when they needed to rely on him to answer the call, bro, he did that and then some, dude. Before I even get the game on. What do you know? He's out there for a 49-yard touchdown run. I would be placed into the game a little later, and the Giants still had a lead at this point. They were doing their best to protect it once we got into the game. But it withered away. Because not only did you have JAHMYR GIBBS do that on a day in which 5 of the 6 touchdowns scored up to that point were already explosive plays, but then you get in overtime, game on the line in a way, and what does he do on play number 1? He takes that shit to the fucking house through the slightest space imaginable. Like, the linemen defensively were there. It's not like he had a ton of room to work with. But he just found a way to shift in and out of these areas. And bam, once he got to that top speed, nobody could catch him. Like, even with a relatively alright pursuit angle, bruh, Dane Belton still had no way of catching up with that man. It was ridiculous to watch. And this would all contribute to him having a day in which he put up by himself 26 total touches for 264 yards in 3 total scores. Fucking madman, dude. But it does give you a little cause for pause if you are the Lions getting in this kind of match with the Giants. I mean, they had them damn near. And even though I didn't see this live, of course, anytime you have a quarterback being able to get out in space, have a man in Gunnar Olszewski toss it over to him, and have one of your pretty good linebackers in Derek Barnes get mossed, and then get thrown off of Jameis Winston's lower body like it's nothing as he trucked through him for a 33-yard receiving touchdown to add even more trickery into the mix in this game. A little embarrassing stuff there. And it just kept on going. I mean, the Giants had a very real opportunity of putting this game away. Yes, before I got placed into the game, Jameis Winston actually threw an interception to the backup safety in Harper, but even then, that Giants defense at that point was still able to force a 3-and-out, and they had the ball back. Now, they were definitely taken to the brink, but hey, the full Winston experience was in full force. I mean, the fact that he was able to pick up some of these deep conversions, especially when we talk about this one that would be caught by Theo Johnson later on in the drive. Like, you're backed up on 3rd and long with Aiden Hutchinson completely in his head a little bit after rattling him on an earlier play. He's bull rushing at him full speed again, somehow manages to evade it. And also, Al-Quadin Muhammad as well, who had been doing great for the Lions this season in pass rushing. He gets away from those guys. Somehow rockets an accurate pass hanging in the air seemingly forever over to Theo Johnson, and he gets down the field for 39 yards. And he tried to establish the run a little bit, and they got in goal-to-go territory against the Lions. They could have put this away if they wanted to, and that's exactly what the mindset was. Kafka, even though they've still been in situations where they can't protect fourth quarter leads and where they have all these late game collapses at the same time, he's been aggressive in these specific situations already. Very clear sign. And I get it from his point. Yeah, they were backed up, lost 4 yards at this point, but anytime you have an opportunity to take down a big dog like the Lions, you got to go all out for it. You have to pull out as many stops as possible. You don't want to leave anything up to chance. And if something happens, hey, you live to go at least another possession. That's how you got to play this. Because you don't want to give the Lions any last gasp of hope. And eventually they snatched it back themselves. I mean, Jake Bates literally had the game-tying field goal damn near curve all the way to the right, but it just snuck in. So, even though nobody really expected the Giants to do all this, I mean, hey, they definitely got theirs in this game. I will say that. Also, interesting note here, like as this drive started, they mentioned that the Giants, with that catch in mind, actually put together their most total catches in a single game of more than 20 plus yards since 1991 with 10. And yeah, that sounds crazy as shit. With some of the names of the quarterbacks that they've had, but at the same time, you know, most of that work kind of gets overshadowed by some of the running backs they've had between the Tiki Barbers and the Ahmad Bradshaws of the world, especially in the 2000s and early 2010s. But still, even when they got stronger on the perimeter, with guys like Amani Toomer or Plaxico Burress being elite at that point, and definitely during the Odell Beckham Jr. era, it just makes you scratch your head and wonder how that didn't happen sooner. But hey, it was definitely an offensive showdown of epic proportions, to say the least. So, to get into some of the other numbers here, Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions had 9 receptions for 141 yards and a score as well. While Jack Campbell in the defensive end had 11 tackles and a TFL, continuing to be consistent on that front. Jameis Winston had 366 yards and 3 total touchdowns with 2 passing and an interception on 50% completion. Tyrone Tracy Jr. had 20 rushes for 62 yards, and Wendell Robinson had 9 receptions for 156 yards and a score on which, after waiting to see it in post, happened off of a flea flicker, essentially. And it was actually thrown relatively well, too. Theo Johnson had 3 receptions for 77 yards, and Tyrone Tracy Jr. had 3 receptions for 68 yards, while Isaiah Hodgins had 2 receptions for 42 yards and a score of his own. But even more chaos would ensue in bonus coverage, because a lot of the early games actually managed to be a little bit competitive and captivating enough for them to decide, hey, let's go on and switch over our coverage to this one. And with this next game in mind, we'd have the Colts taking on the Chiefs. And I'm just going to go off of what I watched. I got in at essentially the very tail end of the game. The very tail end. I mean, the Chiefs get this drive where they're backed all the way up on their own goal line, essentially, damn near. And yet, they just kept finding ways to extend this drive. Rashee Rice got open, completely open over the middle and started to outrun Jermaine Pratt. Because of course he outran Jermaine Pratt. Same man that wanted to give Joseph Asai shit for making a rookie mistake is out here as an established veteran in the game getting torched down the field. That's crazy. He'd have a little bit of redemption every now and then. Still, at every point, there's something to be said about the Colts defense, who had honestly been playing one of their better games in the season, I should say. And they forced the Colts, they forced the Chiefs into vulnerable spots on the field. Time and time again, but they just couldn't come through. Now, there's no way to really explain what would happen on this 3rd and long on their side of the field. Noah Gray had to get vertical for what would turn out to be a 5-yard catch, and he somehow got it in between his legs. And at that moment, at that specific moment, I knew some craziness was about to go down. Yes, we know that the Chiefs had not been successful in one-score games for the longest period of time this season alone. But all it takes, literally, is just a little bit of luck to go on your side. I don't think it gets much luckier than the man having the ball fall between his legs and have him roll over on the ground to the point where it never touched it and where he managed to have control of it. Subsequently, Mahomes would do Mahomes things, buying himself enough time with the protection of the blocking to find a wide open Rashee Rice underneath for a 19-yard gain. And just like that, they were in field goal range. Like, the ball was in their court. I kid you not. They were driving the entire time. They forced the Colts to use all their timeouts. Hell, if they played this perfectly, they could have ended the game right then and right there with a touchdown. Instead, the work of Laiatu Latu would be enough to force Mahomes and the team to settle for a field goal after he initially, earlier in the game, got an interception on him. Still, with all that in mind, and with the Chiefs definitely facing defeat, staring it down early in the 4th quarter, hey, it all came down to overtime. But this should be no problem for the Colts. You know, they'd been money typically in these spots. Hell, they just won an overtime game against the Falcons recently, right? You know, they should be smooth sailing. No. Because this was the key for the Chiefs in this entire game, even without watching it live. With me seeing how they tackled and swarmed Jonathan Taylor in this one. I mean, this 3rd and 1. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor can get a fucking yard. But Drew Tranquill met him right at the summit. Pushed him back 2 yards. And forced the Colts to go 3 and out to start out overtime. In the most pivotal moments, they forced Daniel Jones to beat them. Not the strong rushing attack that Jonathan Taylor has been providing all season. And it gave the Chiefs all the ammo they needed to eventually respond. You got a little bit of a ground out drive here. They wanted to demoralize this team completely. They had all the momentum back on their side. Now, And Xavier Worthy getting the leverage he needed in terms of speed on Travarius Ward Sr., while also being able to secure somewhat contested ball. That did them in right there. It just kept on going. Rashee Rice got himself another 21-yard gain down the field, and Kareem Hunt, by just sheer volume, turned back the clock a little bit. All those contributions and more would be just enough to get Harrison Butker in the perfect spot and have him kick what would be the game-winning field goal, giving the Chiefs the 23-20 win, and I guess upset, if you could call it that. I mean, think about this. All the conversation surrounding this team is that, oh, is the dynasty over? Could they miss the playoffs? Yeah, all those things are potentially real, but I can guarantee you that at this point, all those conversations have flipped. I mean, there are people who still aren't really sold on the Colts, but let's be completely honest here. I mean, the Colts are one of the top seeds in the AFC, and if you have the Chiefs being able to not only get a win against them, but now hold a tiebreaker if things get really juicy in the situation, like you can't knock that at all. You have to give that its proper attention. You have to. So as for the numbers here for the Chiefs side, and then I'll get into the Colts, because boy, Mahomes had 352 passing yards on 63.0% completion and an interception. Kareem Hunt had 30 rushes for 104 yards on the ground. Again, not necessarily efficient, but the volume was enough. And he had a score as well. And Rashee Rice had 8 receptions for 141 yards. Xavier Worthy had 4 receptions for 59 yards. And Travis Kelce had 4 receptions for 43 yards in this game. But now, gotta move on to the Colts, man. Because, look, did their defense put together a hell of an effort? Absolutely. Especially when you consider that one of those early turnovers led to a pretty short drive for the Colts to go and score and start all of their damage in this one. And I mean, hell, even when you look at this right here, even if you didn't watch this game live, you have Zaire Franklin getting himself a 14-tackle game with a TFL, and then you have Jermaine Pratt, for as much shit as I want to talk, the man had a pass deflection, 2 TFLs, and 20 fucking tackles. 20 tackles? By any player in this current iteration of the NFL should definitely be respected. It's probably one of the more prolific games that any defender can have when you look at the aspect of just simply dragging offensive players down to the ground. They were putting that work in, and they were holding the Chiefs down for a while. But even then, as I've been saying before, your defense can only do so much. And there is absolutely nothing that can excuse the fact that in the fourth quarter, in overtime, just hold on to your britches for a second, because when you hear this shit, your mind is going to be absolutely blown. When you look at the total of the drives in the fourth quarter and overtime that this Indianapolis team had, gosh, bro. Oh, man. They had a combined 13 yards of offense, with all 4 of them ending in punts. 3 and outs, to be exact. 13 yards of offense. 13 yards? Meanwhile, you're up on the Chiefs 20-9 to start it out, with you literally forcing a fumble on the very first drive that the Chiefs had that transferred into the fourth quarter. And you go and literally crawl into a hole and do whatever for the next 2 quarters. You can't just have a disappearing act like that. Especially against the Chiefs team, who, regardless of record, is still a strong contender that you need to be on the lookout for. If you're you have to take that shit seriously. You cannot pull off a disappearing act like that. It's bullshit. That can't happen. Now, again, Jonathan Taylor, this is a rough go for him. Again, 16 rushes for 58 yards. Definitely one of the lowest outputs he's had this season. But that attests more of that to what the Chiefs implemented in terms of trying to stop him. And that is the game plan. You're expecting Daniel Jones to be the guy, if you are the Colts, to rise above it and win. But then he's not playing within the system, and that just becomes an entirely different thing on its own. In fact, it's gotten so bad that even though this wasn't a development, I saw one of these headlines on NFL.com for articles saying that now Shane Steichen is reevaluating his play calling duties in schemes. That's how bad this looked. That is an issue. Again, 181 yards passing and 2 touchdowns on 61.3% completion isn't necessarily terrible. But if you're the Colts and Ashton Dulin is your leading wide receiver with a single 48-yard grab, you'd probably be a little worried there too. It's wild to think about it too, because as graphics mentioned in the midst of all this, entering the week, there had already been 43 games, resulting in a game-winning score in the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter or overtime. And what do you know, in some of the earliest games, that exact same trend was very much going down right now. It's wild to think about. And that would continue in this Eagles-Cowboys game, but in a completely different manner. Let me just put it like this. The Eagles were punking the Cowboys in damn near the exact same way they were last season in both of those matchups. Now, those were a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, you had guys banged up left and right all over the place for that Cowboys team at those points, but the outcome was still just completely terrible. And although the Cowboys played them close on the Thursday night kickoff to open the season, it was not looking so pretty here. I will say that the Cowboys at least drove the ball down the field to start off this drive, and George Pickens, oh man, would he have himself a hell of a day. But not before some too much turmoil to really, just way too much going on. First of all, at least the Eagles implemented passing. I mean, hell, if things went a certain way, A.J. Brown would have gotten himself back-to-back drives with a touchdown catch. He got one just completely working Deron Bland on the outside. And then also attempted to pull off some acrobatics and get the ball in the end zone on the pylon by simply touching that and then going out of bounds. They would rule that an incomplete pass, and it would be Jalen Hurts taking it up the gut for a 7-yard gain to get the Eagles the touchdown. They just continued to keep it going and pouring it on, not just offensively, but also forcing the Cowboys into some interesting mistakes, to say the least. They were dealing with a few drops at this point, but I think this really put it into perspective about just how fucked up things were really getting at this point. I mean, look, you get back-to-back situations where CeeDee Lamb was believed to have fumbled the football as it got jarred loose as soon as he plopped to the ground, alright? Now, they reviewed that, And it was a standard catch. He was already down by contact. Fine. Okay. Well, how about Kevontae Turpin on the very next play, slipping on whatever in the fucking backfield? I don't think there was anything on the field at that point. He must have lost traction or something. And he's diving head first. Meanwhile, Tyler Guyton, no, he can't see him, but I am looking at this as it's being replayed again and again, and I'm like, dude, move your fucking big-ass leg out of the way. Is Kevontae Turpin slammed the ball and his hands accidentally there, and he lost it. If Zach Bond's getting his hands on that football, it's over with. All of that chaos would lead to even more as Devontae Smith proceeded to make himself the fucking Undertaker and have his back parallel to the ground on what would be an underthrown Jalen Hurts pass, turning into a catch and a pseudo moss on Kalen Carson, catching him out of position, because at that point, you're not expecting the man to adjust back to the football that way. And by the time the end of the season comes, I'm going to tell you right now, that's probably going to be one of the top 15 catches of the season. Like, that shit is impressive. I'm not going to lie to you. That was just how it was going for the Eagles all around. And, well, you know, Jalen Hurts, once Devontae Smith got some work going in the intermediate game, getting himself a first down pickup, they ran the tush push, because of course they did. And just like that, they went up 21-0. It had potential to get even worse from there. Like, at that point, if you're the Cowboys, you are playing for a little bit of desperation. But George Pickens still would not be denied. Like, man, that man was running some smooth routes. You had him completely torching guys like Adoree Jackson the entire time. They could not hang with him. And he just kept finding ways, even when he wasn't open, to make fucking plays somehow. Jake Ferguson, for his own credit, would proceed to get a pretty big catch over the middle and in the seam, essentially. Almost led to a touchdown, and he was downed at the 1. But hey, as long as you're the Cowboys, you know, and you get on the board here, you're solid. Only Reed Blankenship would have other plans in literally the next couple of plays. Diving right at and out in front of a potential Dak Prescott completion to lurk him. And honestly, even if he wasn't there, Zach Bond was also behind him. So do with that what you will. Nevertheless, man, 21-0. And the Eagles also had the ball back with a chance to make this worse. Fatefully. And right as that point in the game went down, the Cowboys started to get themselves back into it. For as great as things were going for the Eagles, they could not initiate the run with Saquon Barkley to save their lives. And they started getting the Eagles in tough third down situations, giving themselves more time to make things happen as the game progressed along. Promptly after this punt, Kevontae Turpin would take grand advantage of his speed, and eventually it would be George Pickens who would come down with a touchdown catch to start the comeback attempt for the Cowboys. Shockingly enough, for the efforts that the Cowboys were putting in, they still didn't really have a lot of responses themselves at this point. And, you know, I was hesitant about really tracking the material because, you know, like, clearly the intent to come back and make this a game was there, but it seemed like everything was still going so wrong for them. I mean, yeah, they forced the Eagles into 3 different punts in this single quarter and managed to completely force the Eagles to deny the rushing attack at all, or taking it as seriously as they would intend. They forced Jalen Hurts to continue to push that ball, and it did not have the success it did earlier, with coverage becoming just a little bit better. Still, they themselves as an offense were just not doing much. I mean, they started out with a 3rd-and-out themselves, and then just as they were making some progress, man, it's like George Pickens and Javonte Williams were still doing their thing, yeah, for sure. But a Brandon Aubrey missed field goal from 51 yards out, and keep in mind his other one came against the damn... Literally saw him try to go band for band with Cam Little and try to make a 68-yarder. That was the other miss. Like, that's rare. It was only his second one this year, and he is genuinely one of the most accurate kickers in the league since entering. So, anytime you see that happening, you might just concede that it is not your day. But the Cowboys would still get their own efforts in and just continue fighting. Like, CeeDee Lamb got up for a massive gain down the field himself, as Cooper DeJean, towards the end of this game, would have a rough time in the slot dealing with these two. Okay, but he got up for that. DeJean was also tagged with a penalty. And from there, they had the goal-to-go territory to work with, allowing Banford, one of the backup tight ends for the Cowboys. He stumbled a little bit and yet got back in the end zone, free and unguarded, for a score. While the Eagles themselves did have a decent opportunity to respond, at least, you had Saquon Barkley get active out of the backfield. Definitely much more of a threat there than he was as a runner in this game. And again, they were banking on that, sure. Jake Elliott, man, with 50-plus yarders, missed this one, unfortunately, and directly, instantly. You had possibly one of the defining moments of the game with George Pickens. Bruh, Cooper DeJean looked like he just got toyed around with at this point. He goes up over him. DeJean tries to get his arm in there, and it doesn't matter because Pickens, as a 50-50 guy, too big, too strong. And he has good enough speed on him to where all you got to do, as they said, all you got to do is throw it up to him, get it in his ballpark. He's going to find a way to come down with the football. We've seen that with some of his other one-handed catches. And this was no different. I mean, jeez. And what do you know, that drive would be punctuated by Dak Prescott getting out in space and scrambling, even diving over a man into the end zone. And just like that, after the Eagles were up 21-0 in literally the second quarter, the Cowboys were all the way back. Still, the Eagles had a chance early fourth quarter to get back on the offensive. And at the very least, Saquon was trying to establish himself as a threat in this game. They were trying to get him the ball. In fact, this game, this entire play, looked promising for Saquon Barkley, if not for the special teamer and, I guess, now rotational defensive lineman in Sam Williams, getting his fucking arm in there to force a fucking fumble that plopped forward into the hands of Kenneth Murray Jr. to give the Cowboys a key turnover. And still, offensively, they were stuffed. And now, man, the Eagles would go out in the brutal fashion. But I'm going to start this first by looking at it from Elijah Clark's perspective, one of the gunners for the Cowboys, because when you look at his progression throughout this play, and they replayed it several times, bruh, it is actually impressive, the fucking hustle that he showed off, okay? Even if they want to give credit to the long snapper for being the guy who would get this back for the Cowboys, man, you can't tell this without looking at Elijah Clark in the situation. Because the man, as he's trying to get off the release, he's being bullied by Sidney Brown the entire time. I mean, he is completely jamming him, shoving him into the fucking dirt repeatedly. And he is fighting just to get back up, while Sidney Brown is just relentlessly on his ass. But, of course, you can only do so much. Elijah Clark had to deal with all of that shit early on and still had to try to track down the punt returner. So he's doing that. He's running down the field, trying to find the right angle of pursuit, as Xavier Gibson himself gets the football. Now, keep in mind, Xavier Gibson does have the speed to be an electric return man, but his fumbling issues had been such a problem that New York, the Jets, initially cut him for that specific reason. After that specific game earlier this season, just completely swung the momentum away from the Jets. All because he would not protect the football. In fact, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that should have been the Steelers game where this happened. So he's got all that going on already. But hey, he thinks shit's sweet as he goes on and runs. Well, literally, we know that our guy Clark is very much back in the play. And not only was he back in the play, he was coming at him full speed with a fucking vengeance. And BOUT tackles him low, gets his helmet right into the football. And it is removed from Gibson's grasp. And just like that, eventually it's all over the place. There's a scramble for it. And the gunner, the long snapper rather, in C would be the guy to get the ball back up as they pan the camera over to him. But seriously, the hustle on a Clark there is respectful, to say the least. And that kind of stuff is going to always get you more opportunities as a special teamer. I don't know if it would necessarily lead to that, but man, he better get some more looks as a core piece. If you have him making that shit happen, I'm not going to lie. Like, he deserves that. Off that alone. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know, I don't know what to say. Right? Unfortunately for the Cowboys, they would still be stopped. In fact, they turned the ball over on downs. And granted, you don't want to settle for a field goal. You want to take a far more convincing lead, and you want to make good on said turnover by maximizing your opportunity. Like, you started off in goal-to-goal territory, you may as well go down swinging. They went down swinging, with Nolan Smith Jr. impeding their progress. But not to be outdone, the Eagles themselves still could not initiate much of anything. In fact, although they would try, it would be the newly paid D lineman in Osa Odigizua to break right through the interior of that offensive line and get his hands and his full body all over Jalen Hurts to make them lose yards and be forced to punt the football. And it was game time from that point forward. Now, Jake Ferguson, I don't know what it was with lost footballs too. Like, there were other plays that I glossed over that also saw these teams just have fumbling issues. And this could have gotten really scary for Dallas fans if Jake Ferguson would have had this fumble stay in bounds. It was actually a great punch out from DeJean, but fortunately it rolled out of bounds. Just his luck, they'd go back to him and Jake Ferguson would get right down the field on an in-breaking route to get them key first down. And George Pickens, because he'd been that automatic all game long, would be the guy to get the final target. And the demoralizing 24-yard gain across the middle of the field to put Brandon Aubrey in field goal range. And he would promptly make that, giving the Cowboys the 24-21 victory in a very telling fashion, to say the least. To get into the numbers here, Dak Prescott had 354 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception on 63.9% completion. Javonte Williams had 20 rushes, for 87 yards. And George Pickens had 9 receptions for 146 yards and a touchdown while catching all 9 of his targets. So, taking that into account, with the monster game that he had and how reliable he proved to be, granted, as well, receivers can go on hot and cold streaks all the time. But the fact that CeeDee Lamb, on that same fourth down fail initially, wanted to, cry over not getting the football, well, CeeDee Lamb had actually gotten some good looks and had dropped several passes, catching just 4 of his 11 targets. And while he still had a decent day, even he afterwards had to acknowledge, okay, I can do better than this. There's just no need for that. Gotta respect what George Pickens was doing. You can't blame Dak Prescott for wanting to put a little more faith in him with the way that he had been operating in this game. I just hate to break it to you, man. Jake Ferguson also had 5 receptions for 60 yards. As for the Eagles, man, that kind of hot start shows you what this offense is capable of when they are firing on all cylinders. But for them to not do much of anything after that, and at least try or fail between repeated self-inflicted wounds and just total ineptitude, especially when it comes to the rushing attack, shows you how much of a bind they could really be in if they don't get this stuff figured out. Even before the numbers become a thing, 21 points they were up by. And that is tied for the largest blown lead by a defending Super Bowl champion, while also being tied for the largest comeback in Dallas Cowboys history. And this was the game you decided to have that kind of collapse happening. No, dude. No. That just... you can't. You can't do it. A chance for you to pull off the season series sweep, I should say, and you just completely bungle it towards the tail end. It's embarrassing. Jalen Hurts would have a total of 322 yards and 3 total touchdowns with 2 rushing on 69.2% completion. Meanwhile, Saquon Barkley himself was held to just 10 rushes for 22 yards. Masterful by that front 7 to make that happen. And again, force him to throw damn near 40 passes. And while it was working early, they clamped down on it eventually, and it just continued to make this team deteriorate completely. A.J. Brown in this game had 8 receptions for 110 yards and a score. Devontae Smith had 6 receptions for 89 yards, and Saquon Barkley had 7 receptions for 52 yards. Wild stuff. As for this game right here, oh boy. Bucs Rams. Man, I thought this was going to be a masterful one. I mean, you're thinking about it from the Bucs perspective, and of course, Baker Mayfield is going to be the headliner. But no, seriously, when you think about the trajectory of his career, it was dying. It was on the verge of completely being done before he got signed to this very, very short-term deal with the Rams in late 2022. In that fateful drive against the Raiders on Thursday Night Football, whether you want to give it full merit or not, dude, it saved his fucking career. And even he, with a few quotes that they referenced in this game, even he stated that it was a very pivotal moment in his NFL career. And now it was coming all full circle for him to face off against this team again and try to pull off what could be an upset while getting this Bucs team on the right ship again after they'd been dropping a number of their last few games in some very undesirable fashions. And what proceeded to happen in just the first half alone would do away with all of that. I mean, this is probably going to be the shortest one of the specific coverages or commentaries that I have on any game, because it was all Rams and it was sad to watch. I mean, for one, biggest storyline here is that Baker Mayfield himself, it got so bad for him, they relentlessly banged him up to the point where he was still throwing at near the halftime mark, despite clearly being hurt. And yet this throw looked so weird from the very second it released. You just see Baker Mayfield kind of slide down, and at that point, he's still on the ground, trying to tend to his shoulder, which literally cannot move. And it had been nagging him before after a couple of scrambles for first downs in the first quarter. I got scared for him. I thought he blew out his damn shoulder. What ended up happening is that he got an AC joint sprain. And it could have been much worse than that. There's not really a timetable on when he's set to return. But, hey, at least they know that it is not a season ender. They are still going to have his services at some point later, but he's definitely got to get the time he needs to rest up now. And maybe this Bucs team needs it too. Especially when you look at how Matthew Stafford, at his ripe old age, was continuing to carve up this defense. Especially in the red zone. And especially on Zion McCollum. Because I gotta say this shit right now. The nigga had no business guarding Devontae Adams in this game. I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, it's tough. You don't have Jamel Dean in this one. So you're going to be at a bit of a disadvantage there. And can anybody really guard Devontae Adams like that? That's up to you to determine. But all I know is that time and time again, even when Zion McCollum was trying to press him, even when he was playing off coverage on him, the man was just running laps around him the entire fucking time, and he could not keep pace with him. I mean, literally, the first down, he burns him off the fucking release and gets open for the slant, then proceeds later on to get vertical and moss him over the top for a 24-yard touchdown catch, man. And it was just that kind of, it's just literally backyard football. Between the fact that Stafford is money in the fucking red zone as a passer in situations where you'd want to try your hardest to protect the football as a team, they aren't worried about that with Matthew Stafford. And the goal for them was to get pressure on Matthew Stafford and make him move around. They did have a little bit of success with that, don't get me wrong, but you still had the man going out here and doing fucking baseball angles to throw the football. Throwing them sidearm, having a few no-look passes in there like it's nothing. Like, the man, all you gotta know with Matthew Stafford is this. At this point, he now has 25 touchdowns and no interceptions in his last 8 games, with his 273 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one. He's trying his absolute hardest to cement his MVP case. I'm a Seahawks fan. I don't like this shit, but I can't not tell you the truth here. Like, those are legitimately good numbers. Some of the best you'll find. And he's doing this at his given, like, it's wild. He also had 12 straight completions to open up the game. Like, even with said pressure, he wasn't really phased like that. And he cooled down towards the tail end, sure, but by this point, they were already up by 24 points. He didn't need to do all that. Also, just general offensive ineptitude. They are missing a ton of contributors. But you can't make up Cade Otton literally not wearing gloves, supposedly having strong hands, and just bombing the ball all over the place, for Jacoby Durant to then rip it from him and get a 50-yard pick six. Like, come on, dude. So that was the game here. Also, Devontae Adams, has now had 27 games with at least 2 receiving touchdowns, while also adding 5 receptions for 62 yards in this game. I think that's across some of the better overall marks in NFL history when it comes to that specific metric, but I did not catch that specific component in time. Puyanakua had 7 receptions for 97 yards, and Colby Parkinson, damn traitor himself, had 4 receptions for 41 yards in the score in this game. They didn't even need all that from their running game. It just went completely left for this Bucs team. Even with Baker Mayfield getting hurt, though, 47.4% completion, 41 yards, a touchdown and 2 picks is still very, very, very bad. Still, they're like the Rams are just all over it all night long. It was wild. Like, they limited everything. So there isn't really much more I have to add here. I would just be forcing that at that point, and that's not okay. Like, you got to give credit to the Rams for getting the win, but I cannot force feed commentary there. Like, it was all about them at that point. And moving on to this Monday Night Football game, which was appearing to be a little intriguing. 49ers and Panthers. Main note to take away here? Oh, man. Well, Christian McCaffrey revenge game, right? And, I don't know, gains in the rushing attack, what has been the story, they were a little minimal, although with the help of George Kittle being out there, those picked up precipitously towards the tail end of this game and ultimately allowed the 49ers to get a little bit of an advantage here. Just a damn workhorse. By far the most touches amongst any scrimmage player in the NFL right now, and that did not change in a game in which he had 31 total. Shit's crazy. And he had a great all-around game, putting up 142 total yards and a rushing touchdown by himself. In fact, that would come a little later. It was like this. Christian McCaffrey was the surest thing about this game. So it was fair to start out with that. Surest thing about this game. All of everything else was kind of chaotic. Everything else was kind of chaotic. Like, yeah, the 49ers started out fine. I mean, it looked like Brock Purdy was in a groove. He was distributing the ball all over the place, and eventually it would be Ja'Wuan Jennings getting a touchdown while dealing with 3 defenders and shaking them all off of his grasp. Every single one of them. And then, again, it all just devolved into shit. Because you can't game plan for 3 straight drives in between the first and the second quarter, ending in interceptions. And it's not all about the quarterbacks, but just think about it from this perspective. You saw, if you are the Panthers defense, Brock Purdy do all of that to you without having to really push the ball down the field like that. All of these were short gains, passes below 5 yards of depth past the line of scrimmage, some of them even going behind the line of scrimmage as swing plays, and relying on his receivers to make plays after those catches. He was not trying to test you. So, okay, force him to test you. And what do you know? That's what they started doing, especially in a couple cases where there was one specifically, happened a little later, where you had Scarton get himself off of rushing the passer and back up over to Christian McCaffrey's direction as he's trying to run some kind of route out in space. And at that point, Brock Purdy got kind of distracted He wasn't expecting that, so he forced up something a lot deeper, didn't see an incoming defender, and that would be an interception there. In fact, hold on, let me see. Because, yeah, that would be this very one right here, which would be J.C. Horn's second. Literally just a few minutes later in the second quarter, too. But as for this stretch, this first one was all J.C. Horn as well. The fact that he had two this early, he was putting in work. You know, he wanted to try to show that, hey, he could throw the ball deep. No, he couldn't, and he would not for most of the game. But Bryce Young himself also struggled mightily in his own way. Because you are in a bit of a different situation with him. His build is a little different. And he's going to rely more on balance as well to try to initiate passing offense. Even if he did what he did last week. But if you have pressure screaming in his face, well, you know, you're probably going to bait him into making some terrible decision because he does not have the size to make up for that. And what do you know? On what seemed to be an easy drive, because they literally got the free field position following this interception, I don't really get the attempt to pass here and have a scramble towards the outside. But this was just idiotic on Bryce Young's part. You have the pressure coming, but he steps out and just throws it in such a tight space, and JAHMYR Brown would get himself his first interception of the game. But not to be outdone. I mean, the 49ers did respond in a great way, getting themselves down the field, but ultimately being stopped by none other than Michael Jackson Sr. in the end zone. Like, it would literally take Brock Purdy. Goodness gracious. Because it continued. It continued. Still, though, it would take Brock Purdy until right at the 2-minute warning with a pretty good haul by George Kittle, if I do say so myself. That would be the only pass of the game that he completed more than 15 yards down the field. In terms of depth on the pass, okay? That would be the only one. But it would be very fruitful for them as they would get a field goal to get a 10-3 lead in what was otherwise just a pretty weird game to this point. And I mean, hey, they kept it going. Panthers themselves, they started to get some better fortune when they had Chuba Hubbard step into the game, but they didn't have the same spark with Rico Dowdle in this one, and that worked to the 49ers' advantage initially as they would then take this punt, respond on their next drive with a touchdown of their own. Of course, the aforementioned McCaffrey run just getting right through the defense. Brutal thing for the Panthers, too, is even with them doing all this good work, they were getting banged up left and right. A ton of different people. Between Zavala, their center in this third quarter, between Thornton, one of their backup D-backs, between Cherilus, one of their linebackers, and then also J.C. Horn would all be taken out of the game at some point in this third quarter, or ruled out of the game as it waned on. And without J.C. Horn, they tried their hardest to manage, but that is still such a great player to where it's like, okay, you're giving the 49ers a little bit of a leg up in that situation. Even with that being said, this was still a one-possession ball game because McMillan, who had been struggling with a few passes, he actually dropped a few and would go on to drop some later, but hey, Stout, he tried to hang with McMillan the whole time, and he got he got his ass on this simple but potent double move to get himself a 29-yard touchdown catch. It would fail the 2-point conversion, but hey, they were right in there, right? Not for long. Not for long. The bell cow in the Iowa man and George Kittle would be called upon relentlessly, ultimately getting themselves another field goal on the board and what would be the final point. But this would really end the Panthers' opportunity here. Like, I don't know. Like, yes, he was under pressure again, and he was trying to get an inbreaker to Macmillan. But again, everybody's all on him like this to where he cannot see. He can't see. You're going to force a mistake there. And while it was close, Brown would get his second pick, getting his hand just out in front of Macmillan's and just in time. The Panthers still did have a chance after a stop, but ultimately with allowing Cleveland Farrell of all guys to get pressure and a sack on Bryce Young. And then you had Ryan Fitzgerald, who I'm sure has made field goals from that range. In fact, I think he had a game-winning field goal from that range. He missed 57-yarder, and that would give the 49ers a 20-9 victory on Monday Night Football. They now, as a team, the 49ers do, have 54 wins, which is tied for the most in Monday Night Football history, along with the Steelers. Meanwhile, for Christian McCaffrey, this game would give him his 38th of 50 rushing and receiving yards, which is the second most in a career behind Marshall Faulk. And also Roger Craig, alongside him and Faulk, got 1,000 seasons. Craig was in attendance for the game and had embraces with him beforehand. From one legend to another, we're passing it on. This is just an ugly game for quarterback play. George Kittle would have 6 receptions for 78 yards as well. He has the third most receiving yards in 49ers history behind T.O. and Jerry Rice. Already a legend for that franchise. And you have people mentioning that, hey, he should be a 49er for life. He very well should. I don't see why he wouldn't be. Meanwhile, the numbers for Brock Purdy were 193 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions on 71.9% completion. Essentially, still, to this point, 1 completion and 2 interceptions on 15-plus yard throws. It wasn't any better for Bryce Young against the blitz. He literally had a negative yard passing and 2 interceptions against the blitz. But I can't lie to you, the way some of those linemen were getting punked at times, especially at Kwonu. There was a play he just got completely blown up and bullied out of his own fucking assignment. And they promptly got to Bryce Young. At that point, you deserve it if you're not willing to protect him like that. That's crazy. Bryce Young had 62.1% completion in this game as well. I mean, I guess from that perspective, when you look at this, Donald had a combined 10 touches for 74 yards. So it was kind of all around, but it was still it still didn't feel like enough. Tyrell Macmillan had 2 receptions for 35 yards and a score, and Jalen Coker had 3 receptions for 32 yards in this game as well. Jalen Jennings for the 49ers also had 5 receptions for 41 yards and a score. And Chris Barnes for the Panthers would have 10 tackles as well. And there would be even more randomness after the game, because initially, upon seeing it live, I'm just thinking that Jalen Jennings is out here losing his shit. Because he pushes his own teammate out of the way, I think Colton McKivitz, and he just walks right up to Trayvon Merrick and slaps the shit out of him. And I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck did he do? I'm just kind of losing my shit because I don't understand what exactly the context is. But then we got the context as the hours progressed following the result here, and it was stated by Adam Schefter and per other reports that Mayrick had actually, on one particular play earlier in the game, I guess he was coming off of being engaged in a block with him, and he, for whatever reason, decided to hit Jaywan Jennings in a fairly dirty manner in the groin, and he was banged up slightly after that. Probably got some time out of the game, but I guess that was retaliation. And as a result, with all of that in mind, the NFL, would actually suspend Trayvon Mayrick for a game. I'm sure he's going to be facing a fine as well, because that just can't happen, dude. Like, why are you just willingly hitting a man in the groin? I'm not sure. Like, yeah. You know, what are you gonna do, man? But, yeah, that'll do it for the game action that I actually watched. To briefly address some of the other action here, and to start it out with the Pats and the Bengals. Wow. Just, yeah, they actually made this a game somehow. Truly. But Marcus Jones is an inevitable player, and, you know, even with Drake May throwing a pick six to Cincy, okay, and Geno Stone of all people, you figured that it was only a matter of time before the Patriots would get that back. No, I mean seriously. Like, the Bengals were up 10-0, and then they proceeded to rip off a touchdown catch over to Hunter Henry, along with the aforementioned pick six from Marcus Jones. And this made no sense as I watched it in post. You have Joe Flacco bailing out of the pocket, trying to make something happen, but he's staring down Marcus Jones the whole time. And then he just had his hands on his hips afterwards. But I'm like, what did you expect? You were eyeing him the whole way down, on top of at least having some understanding of just how fast that man is. And you still decided to throw that. Like, that's on you. Even with that being said, like, the Patriots were held in a position where they had to settle for field goal after field goal at the very least. And honestly, for a Bengals team that has been going through it as a defense over the past few seasons, to have this Patriots team undergo that so frequently in this game, especially down the stretch, is a great sign. But their offense, for too long, went without a response. And it took them to have a desperate 1-minute drive, essentially, near the end of the fourth quarter, just to try to make this convincing. But even following that, and even with them getting a stop, they could not pick up a crucial first down with Marcus Jones swatting at that. And even if they were crying for flags, man, they let too many of them pass them up. And ultimately, the Patriots would get the 26-20 win. Drake May had 294 yards passing, a touchdown, and an interception on 62.9% completion. Travion Henderson had 18 rushes for 66 yards. Hunter Henry had 7 receptions for 115 yards in the score as well. Austin Hooper also had 3 receptions for 39 yards. As for the Bengals, Joe Flacco had 183 yards passing on 51.4% completion with a touchdown and an interception. Chase Brown had 19 rushes for 107 yards. Andre Oshivos had 4 receptions for 61 yards. Mike Gesicki had 4 receptions for 35 yards. T. Higgins had 5 receptions for 31 yards. And Mitchell Tinsley had 2 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown. And if that got a little interesting, well, this Steelers-Bears game would prove to be no different. Even though, credit to T.J. Watt for not only passing up J.J. Watt in sacks in their respective careers. So, hey, you know, even though J.J. Watt will most likely be a Hall of Famer much sooner, of course, now that he's already retired, he can hold that over him for a long time, honestly. Like, both of them are very accomplished in their careers at this point, of course, but hey, he'll always have the upper hand when it comes to the metric there. Nevertheless, he was also just continuing to be such a game wrecker, especially early on. I mean, this went back and forth somehow, even with Mason Rudolph manning the quarterback position. And they got very creative in using DK Metcalf. The fact that I saw that this man had a rushing touchdown from 6 yards out, I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Huh? Okay. All right, though. It worked. They tied up the ball game, got a nice long drive on the Bears to respond, and promptly would have TJ Watt get himself a sack fumble, leading to an immediate touchdown score by the Steelers here, while also having a different player in Yaya Black, the rookie out of Iowa, forcing a fumble on DeAndre Swift, who has been seeing his reps decrease. His Kyle Munning guy has just continued to be a force to be reckoned with for this team. And that wouldn't change. He'd continue to get in work, but not before Colston Loveland himself would get in for a 12-yard touchdown catch. And, I don't know, you just kept going back and forth here. Jaylen Warren is Jaylen Warren. This would be a 21-17 ball game at halftime. But ultimately, it would be the Bears to overcome all this. And that's despite Caleb Williams being in yet another scenario where he's not even at league average. In fact, probably far below that in terms of completion percentage. But DJ Moore would have himself a hell of a day at the office as well, getting himself a couple scores at this point. And eventually, it would be Kyle Munning to get them a 10-yard lead. 10-point lead. Now, the Steelers would have a very long 7-minute, near 8-minute drive to respond, and would effectively do so with Pat Freiermuth getting into the end zone. But from there, it proved to be a defensive stalemate. Neither team could pull out the haymaker, and ultimately, the Bears forced a turnover on downs, as Jaquan Brisker was able to break up a pass and give the Bears a 31-28 victory. The Bears would have Caleb Williams put up 239 passing yards and 3 touchdowns on 54.3% completion. Definitely want to have him do far better than that, right? Kyle Munning had 12 receptions for 48 yards and a score. DJ Moore had 5 receptions for 64 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ramadinze had 3 receptions for 53 yards. Colston Loveland had 4 receptions for 49 yards and a score. And Luther Burden III had 3 receptions for 46 yards. As for the Steelers, honestly, 171 yards on 77.4% completion percentage for Mason Rudolph with a touchdown and an interception. He honestly, aside from that, did fine. They got great contributions on the ground as well, rushing for 186 yards as a team and getting 2 rushing touchdowns, with Kenneth Gainwell, ironically enough, leading it with just 92 yards on 10 carries. But that is the thing, It's weird because, in a way, the Steelers early on got exactly what they wanted with their defense, being able to step up, by their offense, some easy field, and get them in the end zone that way. While the offense was, at the very least, able to come through for that time period, but then they hit a rut, and, of course, with Mason Rudolph not being as strong of a quarterback in that manner, it's he did do a good job of helping them make this close, but he is still just not a player you can rely on to take over a football game for you. And they needed him to do that in some way. As this, you had chance after chance after chance, as this was a 3-point ball game. Something, anything. And it would not happen. That's highly unfortunate. But as for a couple of the defenders here, Drake DeMarco Jackson. had 15 tackles in this game for the Bears, and along with a TFL, and then Amen Ogbongbemiga had 14 total tackles, along with 2 solo in this game as well. Yeah. Alright. Let's see. What is next? We now have the Jags and the Cardinals, and I ain't gonna lie, So, I shit you not, Jacoby Brissett was literally on pace to have yet another crazy fucking game in terms of total completions for some reason, and it still was not enough. Somehow, some way, because you would count on the Cardinals to do this to themselves. Like, look, man, it's like, how do you possibly explain this? Now, they did do something very well by having the rook and Walter Nolan III recover a fumble for an instant scoop and score to tie up the ball game at that point. But aside from that, you force, in the second half alone, after having a 4-point lead at halftime, 3 different interceptions from Trevor Lawrence. 3 different ones. And on the first 2, you don't do jack shit, despite having Garrett Williams do this. And they would still manage to get a touchdown in the midst of all this from none other than Jacoby Myers. Before y'all went 3 and out again, which was the theme of that entire third quarter, then you had Trevor Lawrence throw another one to Hakeem Davis-Gaither, and you still don't score on that one. Leaving points on the board for absolutely no reason, while being unable to move the football. Now, fortunately for them, they would, in a minute, get a Greg Dortch touchdown from 39 yards out following Trevor Lawrence's latest interception to Buda Baker. Buda Baker's been due for one, by the way. But even then, you still immediately follow that up, allowing the Jaguars to get an instant response from Parker Washington. Somehow, someway, despite the Cardinals winning the turnover margin by 4, okay, they still managed to get themselves locked into an overtime game with this team. Cam Little is going to be able to make any field goal you give him at this point. I think that's been proven. And he would start out overtime doing this. When it came time for Jacoby Brissett to rise above, though, no, that would not happen. And the Jaguars would get the 27-24 win. It's so weird. Like, this is Trevor Lawrence's first ever win when he's thrown more than 3 interceptions. And again, going back to his only playoff appearance, we know a little something about how this can get, even though in that game, the Chargers still got the worst of that. 256 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on 60% completion. And he still manages to come out of this somewhat unscathed. It's wild. Travis Etienne Jr. would have 15 rushes for 86 yards, along with 3 receptions for 30 yards and a score. Brenton Strange had 5 receptions for 93 yards. Parker Washington had 5 receptions for 71 yards and a score. And Jacoby Myers had 4 receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown. As for the Cardinals, Jacoby Brissett completed 67.3% of his passes for 317 yards and a touchdown. Michael Carter had 5 rushes for 28 yards, with a team that is still just struggling to find something there. Yes, I know, with Dave Mercado and Connor out and Benson out, like, it's gotten that bad, but jeez, man. Michael Wilson had 10 receptions for 118 yards. Trey McBride had 9 receptions for 79 yards, and Greg Dortch had 6 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. All right. Moving on to the Browns and the Raiders. Well, you got some good and you got some bad from Shedeur, in his first start, I mean, that's going to be typical, right? That's going to be typical. You do have to give him credit for going out there and getting the win, though. Making some great plays, but also having a few gaps. It is all a learning experience, and he looked to have done all right. There are things that he can build off of. That was the goal. But, the potential is definitely up there. It's why you had Mel Kiper crashing out. Man, I ain't gonna lie. Greatest fucking soldier of Shedeur Sanders, aside from his family, of course, during this period of time. That man was compelled to go on national television and put on quite the fucking acting performance and expose on some of these niggas just to try and make y'all understand how crazy it was, at least in his mind, that Shedeur Sanders is still on the board at this point. It's crazy, man. Ironically enough, you can't take his first NFL touchdown pass away from him, but I mean, it was Dylan Sampson, the rookie out of Tennessee, getting out in space on a screen and just housing it instantly. So, I mean, that was nice. Also, Quinshon Judkins would get himself a couple of touchdowns despite having a pretty weird overall stat line when you look at it. As for the Raiders, man, it is still just like, man. Main takeaway for the Raiders is this. They controlled the time of possession. And in a game where neither team was really able to move the ball down the field all that much, at least when you look at the amount of yardage picked up, they still average sub 4 yards per play. And they still cannot provide rushing lanes for Ashton Jeanty. If you thought that what the Browns were dealing with on their end, with a lack of efficiency, was bad, well, it's still going down for Ashton Jeanty, man. I mean, 17 rushes for 50 yards. The nigga is getting no space. We already know this with the next gen stat that they told us about. And it just couldn't ring any truer at this point of time. And it continued to put the Raiders behind schedule. They forced Geno to throw the ball, and even that has still been a relative struggle. Now, yes, he did have 285 passing yards on 68.2% completion with a touchdown pass, and he did have a few good plays to Tyler Lockett down the field. I do like that. But still, just not a lot going right for them at this point. I mean, it got so bad. You even had Brock Bowers drop a football. You had Trey Tucker drop a football. Shit's crazy. Their offense is so paltry, in fact, and I probably should have mentioned a separate coach firing or coordinator firing earlier, but I will tie that in time. As far as this game's relevancy goes, the Raiders, per Adam Schefter, would fire Chip Kelly after this. They would fire him. Their offense has been near the bottom of the league in all of the major categories. And it is just yet another situation where he brings forth or brought forth a failed promise. Like, the offense that was being generated at Ohio State last season had these teams reconsidering everything and taking a good hard look at reevaluating him, thinking to themselves, hey, maybe we should give him another chance. The Raiders tried to swing at it. Tom Brady and them boys thought it was going to be a good move. Because apart from everything else that happened in this game, Geno is still going to feel a lot of pressure if you have, one, Carson Schlesinger getting another 10-tackle game, along with a TFL, and two, I shit you not, this defense. And even I, when hearing it, did think that this couldn't have been real, right? 10 sacks. 10 sacks as a defense. Oklahoma did that shit to Auburn. It is college football. Meanwhile, you have a roster crafted with grown men getting moved out of the way against their will while having other grown men topple their quarterback in the backfield relentlessly. For a productive day for the Browns overall. Like, that's bad. Myles Garrett himself is the obvious guy here, getting 3 sacks. But it wasn't just him. You had a lot of other people contribute. I mean, Devin Bush, McGuire, Thomas, Michael Hall Jr., the Ohio State man, getting a half sack. Malik Collins getting 2.5 sacks. Shelby Harris getting a half a sack. Jerome Baker as well, the former Seahawk and Titan, getting a half a sack as well. That's ridiculous shit, dude. We are talking about 10 different sacks being split up across 8 different fucking defensive players. That's crazy. That is crazy. And you think a quarterback can survive that? You think an offense can survive that? No wonder the Raiders came out looking the way that they did. But I will progress it over to the winning side because Shedeur Sanders, with his 209 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception on 55% completion, even if it wasn't the strongest debut in the world, would do something pretty historic, as it's been referenced several times. But he would be the first quarterback for the Browns, period, since 1994, to win their first ever start with the team. They had been 0-17 in that mark. And we're talking about a number of different names here. Number of different names of varying ability, of varying talent and skill level, without any of them being able to win their debut game with the organization. He's yet another name added onto that infamous jacket with the last names of every single Browns quarterback since 1999. It's too dysfunctional of an organization, but they managed to break that trend for at least a little while and get themselves some good fortune, I guess. Quinshon Judkins had 47 rushing yards on 16 carries and 2 scores. Dylan Sampson had 2 receptions for 59 yards and a touchdown, aforementioned. Isaiah Bond had 2 receptions for 58 yards. Harold Fannin Jr. had 4 receptions for 40 yards. And Jerry Jeudy, in the dumbest way imaginable, would have a reception for 39 yards that would stand, but wouldn't really do much because of the fact that this man decided to pull off fucking and one street ball moves while Jeremy Chin, of all safeties, is chasing his ass down. And promptly, he skips into literally having Jeremy Chin go like this from behind and snatching the football away. To add even more chaos to this game. Tyler Lockett would lead the receivers, in fact, lead all receivers with 4 receptions for 62 yards. Ashton Jeanty had 8 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown out of the backfield, and Brock Bowers had 6 receptions for 55 yards and a score. And then, for the last game here, we have the Falcons and the Saints. Well, we know what the Saints are, don't we? Like, it wasn't going to be hard for the Falcons to win this game, even with Kirk Cousins playing in relief, and yet they still, at a certain point, tried to give it away to them. I mean, The first few possessions for the Saints went with them literally not moving a single yard and having a fumble forced by D. Alford, of all people, man. Then you promptly proceeded to have them lose yardage and miss a field goal, despite having a tremendous start in field position from their return man in Mason Tipton. And he belongs as a return man because he can't fucking catch the football. The Saints weren't even doing anything on offense. And while the Falcons had taken a 10-0 lead with David Sills V of any one of their wide receivers getting into the end zone for his first touchdown in literally years. I can tell you that right now. The man has been flying under the radar all over the place, not really getting as many opportunities. And to think that this man was once a teenager being recruited by USC, he's been through quite hell of a football journey, to say the least. So I mean, that was cool, but still, that wasn't enough for him. Kirk Cousins just had to throw an interception to Justin Reed that would result in a pick six and somehow get the Saints in this game. He just had to do it. Why? I don't know what compelled him to. I really don't. From there, man, I mean, like, at no point did you really believe, if you were watching this live, that the Saints were going to win this. Even with this first drop to open up the third quarter, it says a lot. When you get a great start, you get some good work from Devin Neal, the rookie out of Kansas. And it was interesting to see if they would actually plan on utilizing him or not. Well, they definitely started to. Even with him getting them down the field a little bit and them getting into goal-to-go territory after Taysom Hill does Taysom Hill things, right? Yeah, they would still turn the ball over on down. Wasting away all that clock just to not contribute anything to scoring. And from there, Darnell Mooney and Bijan Robinson, with Darnell Mooney's 49-yard touchdown catch, would essentially end the game right there with that score. Because, again, it's the Saints. Like, they tried and still punted, turned the ball over on downs, and had Xavier Watt get a fucking interception out of desperation to cap off what would be a 24-10 victory for Atlanta. Is this going to be consistent from them? Probably not. But again, they have the fortune of playing against a team that is just so far into the dumpster fire right now. Kirk Cousins had 199 yards and 2 touchdowns with an interception. Bijan Robinson had 14 rushes for 70 yards. And Darnell Mooney had 3 receptions for 74 yards. As for the Saints, Tyler Shuck had 243 passing yards on 69.8% completion and an interception, while also leading a terrible rushing attack with 22 yards. I mean, seriously. Mason Tipton had as many rushing yards as Alvin Kamara in this game, and they averaged just 2.8 yards per carry as a team. As for a few of the receivers, Olave had 9 receptions for 70 yards. Juwan Johnson had 6 receptions for 46 yards. Devin Neal had 5 receptions for 43 yards. And Davon Vele had 3 receptions for 37 yards. But, okay, that'll do it for all of the game action. And we'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.